Rookie wide receivers in fantasy football for 2026, expectations, risk, upside, and whether or not you should draft these players to your fantasy team this year. I dropped the risky draft picks video and I purposefully excluded rookie receivers. I thought they needed their own dedicated video because this was a heavily debated draft class and all of these players landed in very precarious situations. They will have big ADP movement all throughout draft season. So let's talk about the top rookie receivers and what to expect from a fantasy perspective. If health concerns weren't an issue, Jordyn Tyson might have been the first wide receiver taken off of the NFL draft board, but the pick was still a very substantial pick, and we know for a fact that if he is on the field, he is the clear wide receiver 2 at the very least for the Saints. Long term, it is entirely possible that he is the first look in this offense, but a more reasonable year 1 expectation is that Olave remains the wide receiver 1 and Tyson is the wide receiver 2. But health does remain a question mark here. The Saints have Tyson on a ramp up program. Seems like they're not trying to rush him along. That's fine. We don't need to panic over that. We will need to monitor it to ensure that nothing funny is going on with his health or that the slow ramp up wouldn't extend into the regular season. But realistically, he's a clear starter, and Tyler Shuck is going to push volume this season. We talked about it. What are our expectations for Tyson as the wide receiver 2 in this offense with Tyler Shuck expected to make a leap? Now, looking at last year, Shuck played 11 games, but he really only started about half the season. He pushed very good volume with over 2,000 yards. I know that we all fear second-year regression after that traumatic Jane Daniels experience, and it is easy to say that that can happen with Shuck, especially because we were skeptical from the jump with him. But Shuck spent the entire offseason last year splitting reps and battling to be the starting quarterback. He had to wait half a season before finally being anointed. He's finally going to get his offseason to prepare as a full starter, and the Saints have done an excellent job of adding additional talent to help his progress. Kellen Moore, I like him from a fantasy perspective. He is rather notorious for his pace of play and pushing heavy volume. There were only 2 starts last season where Tyler Shuck threw the ball less than 25 times. He started 9 games and he averaged 33 attempts in those games. That is an excellent volume expectation for the Saints offense. And Jordyn Tyson is going to fit well into that. And while the Saints obviously could try to balance out the offense a little bit more with Travis Etienne added, he's not exactly a massive running back, right? So they should remain pass heavy. I think that 5 to 8 targets is a very reasonable expectation for Jordyn Tyson in year 1. And that would be him hitting 100 targets. That's very solid for a guy ranked wide receiver 36 right now in Fantasy Pros ECR. And then there's an additional caveat here. Tyson could be the wide receiver 1 immediately, really. We need more information on the situation and we have to monitor it very closely. But Chris Olave has not been cleared from his blood clot that he suffered at the end of last season. And it's not as if we have any timeline expectations. It's not a high ankle sprain where we say, oh, he's going to be out X amount of weeks. Boom, we know the realistic expectation in terms of timeline. But I would logically say that I would expect him to be cleared during this offseason. There's no real way of knowing, but it should not be an issue, assuming that Olave is good, right? At the very least, again, we can guarantee that Tyson will be the second look in this offense. All he has to do is surpass Juwan Johnson. And outside of that, there are no major issues. He is a fine pick for the payoff, and he should perform as a top 24 receiver in year 1. Carnell Tate is pretty cut and dry, in my opinion. I don't think it's a risky pick at all. You should expect similar production to what we saw last year with Tetairoa McMillan. The differences are that Tate has a quarterback in Cam Ward that will factually push more volume than Bryce Young did for Tetairoa McMillan. But the counterpoint to that, and why I wouldn't really expect him to perform at a much higher level than McMillan, is that Tate has more competition. McMillan's competition was Xavier Legette. Coker didn't really come on until the end of the season. He started off unhealthy, had to battle through an injury before making it on the season, slow ramp up, and then we saw the late season surge, right? The Titans, on the other hand, signed Wan'Dale Robinson. And while you might feel some type of way about Wan'Dale Robinson, Brian Dable clearly loves him, though, right? And that's the offensive coordinator. Now, logically, those 2 players don't really compete with each other's roles, right? So it's not that that's a concern that Wan'Dale is going to be taking reps from him. It's just a volume perspective, right? I would be lying if I didn't think that Wan'Dale in the slot could garner a decent amount of volume. Plus, the Titans haven't gotten rid of Calvin Ridley. Chimere Dike and Alec Ayamanar have showed upside last season. I would feel very comfortable saying that both of them are tougher competition than Xavier Legette based off what we saw last year. So ultimately, I do think that Tate is the wide receiver one, right? He is the clear alpha here in this offense in theory, right? The wide receiver one of the future for sure. And I absolutely see this offense heading in a positive direction with the way that Cam Ward looked in the second half of the season. And we've also got a clear upgrade in coaching, right? The Titans do have plenty of depth at receiver, so there's a balance that will happen. Now, Tate is currently ranked wide receiver 30. I would like that to be a little bit lower, but it's workable, right? He should pay off at that ADP. Again, I don't think it's risky, but at the same time, does he really have the year one ceiling compared to guys like Jordyn Tyson and Makai Lemon, right? That's my only issue here, is that I think he's a very safe pick, but I don't know if he's got that league winning upside this season specifically. Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to phrase it, right? Lower risk pick, and not necessarily the ceiling of his counterparts if things go perfectly for everyone in all their situations, right? So while Tate might be the higher ranked guy in this list, I might be more inclined to bypass him for more of the higher upside, riskier options. Makai Lemon will remain one of the most controversial and heavily debated draft picks all throughout the offseason. There was just no way around it. And as I look across social media, which I love to do, there is the most absurd range of opinions regarding this offense and receivers that I might have ever seen, right? On one side, you'll see people saying that Lemon is taking all of AJ Brown's vacated targets. It's going straight to Makai Lemon, right? So the massive upside, the ceiling is just the most incredible ceiling that you will have ever seen, right? And then you'll have another side that says he's going to be a complete bust. Like, he has bust written all over him, his weird behavior, right? And he's already got a hamstring issue. All right, it's not adding up. It's too risky. It's not going to work out, right? And then you'll have another side that says Lemon and Smith are great. There's no issue with them, but apparently Jalen Hurts just can't hit the broadside of a barn. So you combine the lack of confidence in Jalen Hurts and people debating between Lemon and Devontae Smith about whether or not Smith can really be the alpha receiver in this offense. Can Lemon be the alpha receiver? Who is it going to be? The fact that the tight end position can also be the dominant look here, and now it's not just Goddard. They've also got Eli Stowers as well, who we all loved as a prospect. Then also, oh my gosh, you add in the fact that last year was a down year for Saquon Barkley, and a lot of people do expect a bounce back from him as well, with the Eagles hopefully returning to pushing more volume through him. Yeah, there's a lot of factors going on here for Makai Lemon. The 2025 Eagles season really casts an ugly shadow over that entire offense, to the point where I think everyone's forgetting what this offense can be when it's performing at its best. AJ Brown's frustrations last year were valid, right? But lest we forget, the man had over 1,400 yards in his first two seasons with Philadelphia, and his 2024 game pace was over 1,400 as well, right? Last year was the only issue. He barely cracked 1,000 yards, right? But you can make the argument that, hey, it worked out so many years before. Was the primary issue last year coaching? That maybe was the driving issue last year in terms of the offensive coordinator. They've got a new one. They're moving on here. The big concern that people have is that even if the Eagles offense does bounce back, does Lemon's play style and usage really match Jalen Hurts' capabilities? I think Lemon is a type of player that the Eagles have not, and we have not seen in this offense before. And it's important to note that he will absolutely not be filling A.J. Brown's role. Brown played about as little in the slot as humanly possible. This offense is changing. We're not replacing one-for-one roles. You don't need to have Lemon living up to Brown's expectations. Things are going to be different. We have to have different expectations. Now, Lemon's rank should rise some, right? It's at a very extremely reasonable wide receiver 39 right now. As we get more into training camp, we actually see him on the field, not dealing with a hamstring injury, see what this offense really looks like and how things are shaking out. I would expect it to rise a little bit there. But I must admit, I do have preferences for different receivers at lower ADPs with stronger floors and probably the same ceiling. But still, Lemon is very intriguing for 2026. While all rookie receivers are naturally boom bust, Concepcion is the heightened version of that because he's got the natural risk plus the fact that out of all the first round guys, he was the one that profiled as the riskiest pick because of his drop issues, right? And then there's the quarterback situation. Oh, and then the amount of competition in the offense. And I know you're looking at me like I'm crazy saying competition, Tara. It's the Browns. It was trash last season. What is he really competing with? No, there is competition. Denzel Boston is just as strong of a prospect. And we'll get into a little bit more in detail about that in a second. But personally, I really love Boston's potential. And people shouldn't underestimate his potential to be a high performer in this offense. Harold Fannin Jr. is there, garnering over 100 targets as a rookie. That's massive. That's significant, right? And then there's Jerry Jeudy. He does exist. He's not going anywhere. But I do think it's safe to say that he can beat out Jerry Jeudy, and they don't play the same role anyway. But even with Jeudy not factored in, it's still very possible that the offense can go Fannin first with Casey, Concepcion, and Denzel Boston bouncing back and forth between who is actually going to be the second look, or vice versa with the receivers taking a leap forward, or maybe all three being equal contributors. So there's a lot of different directions that this could go. Now, all of that confusion plus the quarterback situation means that it is definitely baked into his ADP, and we're not having to put in a massive investment onto him. We're getting an automatic discount here, especially because of the quarterback situation, right? And for that reason, I do reserve the right to hold my opinion and not put it in significant concrete until I see solid quarterback play here, or at least not even maybe just solid quarterback, just a solid quarterback decision, right? Somebody named, a clear direction, right? But ultimately, because we get this discount for Concepcion being on the Browns, he's still an excellent draft target. Minimal investment lessens the risk. And again, wide receiver 52 right now in rankings isn't really a major risk. I could see this if I had to comp this to the situation where I think best case scenario this can play out for him, and how I would like to see it develop as the season goes along. I could see this being an Amon-Ra St. Brown type of rookie season for him. The first half of the season, not really hitting on much, right? No touchdowns on the field, clear role. That's not a question. But unusable production because the offense really isn't performing at a high level, right? And then all of a sudden, you hit around a few weeks before the fantasy playoffs, and this man turns into a production menace and wins leagues, right? That's what separates him from like from a Carnell Tate, right? Someone who I know for sure probably has a certain base level targets, a more stable offense, a more stable quarterback situation, right? An ascending team in theory that should be easier to develop for their new coaching staff, right? But at the same time, the true upside in terms of pure volume because of the role that Concepcion would play in the offense could definitely see him hitting those double-digit targets in the back half of the season if the Browns can pull all things together. So it's an extremely risky pick, right? Because the floor is stupid low, right? We're at a risk of having less than 10 fantasy points on a weekly basis for the entire season. But if they can figure something out, the ceiling can get there, and he can realistically be the first look in this offense, right? And then when you're looking at that from a draft perspective, combined with his ADP, yeah, I can make the investment into that at a minimal risk and feel good about it. Speaking of the Browns, we do have to talk about the second receiver they drafted, my boy Denzel Boston. There's only a 5 receiver gap between Concepcion and Boston. And since we already talked about the risk of the quarterback situation and the offense as a whole with the Browns and why the rookies are getting these nice discounted ADPs, let's dive into a comparison between Boston and Concepcion to really understand their roles in the offense and potential usage. These are two very different players, and that's great because from a draft perspective, I really like what Cleveland did. You got two guys that do not conflict with each other. They can together combined complete an offense with Harold Fannin Jr. in a perfect world, right? They don't compete in terms of a role. Boston more so conflicts with Jerry Jeudy. And I do have confidence. No insult to Jerry Jeudy, right? I'll be trying and be nice here, but he has been a wee bit mediocre, right? Outside of one lovely year courtesy of Jameis Winston, right? I don't think it's going to be that difficult for Boston to beat him out. It just is a matter of how long it takes him to do that. Ultimately, he will get there. Now, the key here in whether or not we think there's going to be upside for Boston is whether or not we think that Todd Monken's offense in Baltimore directly translates to Cleveland. Because I talked about this when I discussed Harold Fannin Jr. in a previous video. There's a very logical comp going on of Concepcion will be the Zay Flowers in this offense. And then you factor in the Ravens being very tight end friendly, tight end forward as an offense. You could make the assumption that Boston is naturally only going to be able to have a complementary role because this offense will feature Concepcion and Harold Fannin Jr. based off what Monken did in Baltimore. But my little wrench that I throw in here for you is that Todd Monken's offense might not actually be necessarily tight end forward, right? When we look at Mark Andrews in Baltimore, he was there before Todd Monken got there. Todd Monken was working within the confines of the personnel that he had. And for what it's worth, it seemed like repeatedly that Todd Monken was trying to push more volume to the receivers. But unfortunately, no one outside of Zay Flowers could actually produce. So Zay, by default, had to get all that volume because Rashad Bateman was kind of a bust, right? And a wide variety of older veteran receivers and mid-round picks never really worked out. So I'm not shocked that they went out and grabbed Boston right after Concepcion, because Boston can be that big body contested catch, true X receiver that can actually catch the ball consistently that Todd Monken has been waiting for. As much as I love Boston, though, I can't admit the quarterback situation in the offense and the competition in the offense does make him the least likely wide receiver to hit in year one. But at wide receiver 58, for the talent that he has, what are we really risking here? I do like him as a pick. Now for the honorable mentions. Omar Cooper Jr. did get the higher draft capital. You might be wondering why I talked about Denzel Boston and not him. Well, honestly, I'm more sketched out by the Jets than the Browns, purely from a coaching perspective. And I think there's a natural ceiling to Cooper's game as a prospect. Couple that with him being in what should be a low-volume offense and being beside a very known high-volume receiver in Garrett Wilson, I don't see where he can really get massive upside in year one. All of the other receivers on this list are dealing with one or two of those issues, not all three of those issues, so it's just a bum situation for Cooper. Now, DeJon Stribbling, I do believe he was drafted to be a direct Jauan Jennings replacement, and by all accounts, no matter how much the 49ers tried to defend it, he was overdrafted. I don't know a lot of people that had him over several of the other prospects that he went ahead of, right? But hey, that's what they wanted, right? But in no way, shape, or form am I looking to invest in the second coming of Jauan Jennings as a rookie. Now, technically speaking, he does have a stupid clear path to being the wide receiver one of this offense, right? Because Mike Evans and Ricky Pearsall are extremely high-risk injury players, right? So he's not the worst pick as a late-round dart in deep leagues, but again, if all things were to remain the same and those other two receivers stayed healthy, factually, that's a wide receiver 3. And Germie Bernard has second-round draft capital as well, and he actually did deserve it. But while DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman aren't extremely high upside players, right, from a fantasy perspective at this point in their careers, the odds of Aaron Rodgers preferring a rookie over baked-in chemistry with DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman, who may not have that chemistry, but is one of the most reliable possession receivers in the league, that's rough for Bernard to really separate from. So massive upside in year one, probably not going to happen. Now for the future, right, because long-term commitments here can be adjusted. There could be promise, but looking purely from a redraft perspective here, more than likely, the wide receiver 3 on his team as well. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can find me across all social media platforms at It's Tara Time. I am also live every Wednesday on YouTube at 8 p.m. EST, so make sure that you stop by and chat. It is always a good time. You can ask me any questions that you want. You can also subscribe to my Substack if you want to support me another way. And if you are looking for new fantasy football tools in 2026, look at Player Profiler. You can use my promo code TARA for 25% off at Player Profiler.